We're trying to create a sort of self-reinforcing hype train. That accelerates under its own power.
More like an antifragile marketing system, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That gains by people being confused about it.
Butterscotch. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 12D2 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm relearning how to program.
I'm Sam and I write a lot of words.
And today is Spooktober Spook 30.
So spookin'.
2000 spookin' teen.
Spooktober. Spooktober has been a spooky month. Fortunately, it's only 1 week long.
Yeah.
So we got that going for us. Although, actually, you know what? Spooktober, the week, has actually been much better than the rest of October, the month.
That's true.
Yeah. I think spooking is actually it's sort of a positive.
Yeah, it's kind of brought life back.
Yeah. Oddly. With all the skeletons and spooky things. Also, before we go any deeper, we have a warning. We're going to be swearing.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah, I think so. Spooky is also just one of my favorite words, I think, generally speaking, because it means scary, but it sounds
cute.
Cute.
It's more like ironically scary.
Yeah. Like whenever we walk in the basement, sometimes now it's Halloween, you know, around that time, then somebody be like, oh, it's very spooky down here.
Yeah. I got a little skeleton hanging on my lamp outside.
Isn't he cute over there?
He's like hugging the lamp. It's like, oh, it's so spooky.
Yeah, I was looking at him when I walked in today and I was like, what's he looking at? Because he's looking into the lamp.
So he was supposed to be facing outward, but so here's the irony of that skeleton is we got that skeleton years ago when we were living in an apartment and we just hung him on the front door and we needed to name it. So Samper chose the name Sparky for the skeleton.
Okay.
Very spooky.
Now he's hanging on a lamppost and we can't keep him from just gazing directly into the electrical beam of the light. And we're
Makes sense.
Now we know. Yep. Now we know why his name is Sparky.
My favorite is our dad put up, skeletons, posable skeletons, and they're lounging on they're on the fence that sort of goes up the steps. And so
spooky.
But their pelvis, I mean, the way that they got them on there, I think was at what are those called? Like the little ball sort of banister things at the end of a stairwell, where there's a ball on top of the post that holds the whole stairs together. So the skeletons themselves, the ball goes through their pelvis, which is like what's anchoring on there. So you set a picture of this in, and there's these skeletons kind of just lounging. It looks like they're sunbathing on these portions. It's very spooky. You know?
Yeah, so spooky. Oh, I got chills. Yeah. All right, so let's get on to some news. So this week we got actually some particularly zany things happening. But first, let's hit the
not spooky though.
Just zany.
Nothing.
Only zany.
Well, there's some spooky stuff later in the news.
Oh my God.
We'll talk about it. So get your spook pants on. All right. So first, Dwarven Jester sent us some candy.
Oh my gosh.
Over at mailbox.bscotch.net.
This is not the spooky news.
This is not the spooky news. It was fucking delicious.
Yes.
So thank you very much for that.
We did eat all of it.
I think it was a day and a half.
In a day and a half.
This is 2 boxes of these delicious, was it sponge candies? Is that the term?
Yeah.
But it's like that honey, it's like that crispy honey.
Now,
stuff
the Butter Cave, which is the name of our studio down here, like our location, the Butter Cave is like a candy incinerator.
Really is.
Yep.
Like Andy brought in some Reese's peanut butter cups last week too. He's like, yeah, I got these.
This is a huge bag.
It was a huge, like a trick-or-treater size bag.
Yeah.
It was like within 18 minutes, just completely decimated.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure it took most of one day.
No, I don't think so. Because I think he got it at past noon.
That's possible. But it was a jam day, so we had a full 8 hours to finish it off.
Oh, yeah. Fair. Point taken.
I ate the final one the next morning.
Okay. So there was one remaining?
There was one remaining.
You got to fuel those brain lobes with sugars.
Yeah.
You know? Also, we have an update to the Shenanigans shop, which is over at shop.bscotch.net. It's our new merch store. We got some requests for 2XL shirts. And so we got some of those coming in soon.
Just for the OG shirt to start with, so we can see how it do.
Yeah, that's the black shirt with the studio logo on the front. So we're gonna have those coming. So keep your eye on that if you've been looking for those. All right, so on to the meat. First thing, we left on a cliffhanger last week.
Yeah,
we got to get this out of the way, which is if we're gonna write a book that's so boring that it's meant to put you to sleep, which celebrity are we going to contract to narrate the audible version?
I know you all have been on the edge of your seats this entire week.
Everybody has been
thinking
we've
about
gotten billions of tweets, paper airplanes, Post-its, notebooks, sketch pads, Etch-a-Sketches, just
Any form of communication.
smoke signals, Morse code,
Just everything.
sign language.
Who you got? Who's your person?
Oh, Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, I guess it was
Very soothing voice.
kind of a similar direction. I was thinking Nicolas Cage.
What if they tag teamed it? Or what if they did it in harmony?
Ooh, yeah. So it sounds like a choral sort of hum.
Yeah.
And what if randomly Christopher Walken would speak one sentence?
You just kind of jump in there.
Yeah.
The problem is that might be too interesting.
Yeah, I think it would.
Yeah,
be.
but if you were listening to it constantly, I feel like it would the chaos of the cadence would, I think, eventually just knock you unconscious. Yeah, because your brain would stop functioning. You'd just be like, "What the fuck is even happening?"
Actually, if we had William Shatner,
yes,
and
Christopher Walken
alternating chapters,
alternating sentences,
that would be very confusing.
Yes.
And have a lot of unnecessary pauses, which I think would make it more boring. So that's good. So we'll be working on that. All right, now the big announcements.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Which
So
one's going first?
Crashlands is coming out in China this week.
On Thursday.
This is what we were going to talk about last week, but forgot about for some reason.
So this has been a work in progress for some time.
Otherwise known as a year.
I assume we're fully out under NDA because they've announced it.
It is,
right?
it's fully announced.
It is out.
We can
Fully
talk
announced.
about it. We can't talk a lot about sort of the process behind getting it there. But it's been a very culturally enlightening experience.
Yes.
We had to learn a lot about China, and thankfully, Sure, who is our game mechanic, he's from China. So
It's very nice
that
cultural.
was worked out
Very
perfectly.
serendipitous.
Yeah. And so he speaks the language, he reads it, he writes it, he knows the culture.
He knows the memes, most importantly.
Most importantly, he's in tune with the memes.
So we made some comics based on the memes and did a bunch of other sort of fun things to just, kind of tie ourselves in nicely. And we're really excited to see what the heck happens because we have no idea. What does it even mean?
even a guess.
We haven't localized Crashlands into anything else except for
So we
weird
kind of picked the hardest place.
Well,
Yeah.
we didn't. I mean, it was more that we were going to get support from our publisher to translate it because we don't have a publisher outside of this very specific scenario.
Correct.
And so they took on all the initial administrative
They helped a lot.
and cost burden of figuring out how in the hell to translate 50,000 words of weird, wacky English puns that nobody in the world has ever written before into culturally appropriate Chinese weird,
That are
wacky
still
puns
funny.
That
Yeah.
are still funny.
Yeah, this is the biggest challenge of actually our games in general is all the humor in our games. It largely revolves around wordplay and What's when you like take two words?
Portmanteaus.
Portmanteaus, right?
Yeah.
So like the names of things are just like two English words smashed together.
Sawgrass.
Yeah, that is fortunately a real thing, but almost everything else.
And it's more just we just stuck those with other ones that are more.
Like the
There's got to be a
Coldy,
good example. somewhere.
Coldy Spin Popper.
Yeah.
The Coldy Spin Popper,
That's a good one.
the
That's a good
Bernie
example.
Lid Flipper.
How you want to? How are you going to go about doing that? Because also a lot of languages don't allow for the level of flexibility that English does. Where
to
in
just
English,
like twist words around.
where in English you could turn any noun into a verb if you want.
Yeah,
Just
just with confidence.
Yeah.
know,
Actually, you can just
it's
turn
all about
any
how you
part of
wear it.
speech into any other part of speech.
Yeah,
It's all about attitude.
Posture. Just do what you want.
that's not really
And
allowed.
So Crashlands is coming out. So it is coming out at the end of this week. It's coming out on the Wii Game platform, which is run by Tencent. It's kind of like their Chinese answer to Steam,
Right.
Basically. And so we're doing a PC version over there. No localized mobile stuff. It's just this one. And actually the name of the game in Chinese is not Crashlands. It's
collapsing continent.
Collapsing Continent, which is pretty dope.
And kind of spooky.
Yeah.
It's very spooky. So
Also, we want to talk about the origin of that because it is kind of an interesting origin story.
I don't know.
Is it against the rules?
We'll
in
hang
some way?
on. Let's hang on to that. We'll see.
Okay. It's probably fine.
I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
I go. For
All right. So Crashlands, as some of you may know, is pirated
A lot.
somewhere out there. Someone pirated Crashlands.
Yep. I was actually looking at our stats yesterday, and we broke the 10 million Android users mark.
Right.
But
Spoiler
almost all
alert.
of them were pirates.
Right. All like 98%.
Something like that, yeah.
And so,
But I was still pretty pumped because that's a big number. So I was like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also kind of lame, but
so
pretty cool.
it turns out that there's a bunch of Chinese versions of Crashlands floating around that are pirated versions. And there are teams of people over in China who they just find games, they rip them apart and hack the shit out of them and jam as many Chinese characters as they can. And they rewrite it, they translate it, they do everything. And then they redistribute this fully translated, localized Chinese version for free.
Yep. And so it turned out the main one that was the most distributed was named this continent.
Collapsing
Continents.
Yeah.
And so we were just like, all right, we're gonna roll with this for brand recognition because somebody else kind of got in the way and took our brand.
Well, there already were like 2 million people playing it under that name.
Yeah. So the concern is basically for the people who know about it. If they know about it with this name, then if we change the name, then all of a sudden we're stuck, right? So weirdly, we're like, yeah, all right, we'll just go with that.
Yep. So who knows if that was a good idea? I don't think anybody knows.
Stuff, we'll steal your name. Call it even. Pirates.
Fair.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting. We're doing the whole things are on fire all the time over here sort of thing. So
it is launch week.
Yep.
Over here.
As we know, there's no such thing as a good one. So that has, I think, already proven itself a little bit.
Yep.
This morning.
We discovered that some Chinese characters, when used in pet names, crash the game for some unknown reason.
That's going up. Fixes going out.
Yep. Super neat. So we'll be sort of on the edge of our seats for the rest of this week. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah. And I think this is, I'm glad to be able to actually talk about it because this, among many other projects, are just churning in the background in our studio. And we come on this podcast every week and we're like, all right, in the news, none of that stuff that we're actually doing because we can't talk about it because there's NDAs and there's all this other shit.
Well, speaking of which,
and even still, we can't go through all the details, which is kind of sad, but
Scuffle Buddies.
Yep. Scuffle Buddies.
Very secretive.
That's under our own personal NDA.
There's an announcement coming on Thursday, 10 a.m. CST. So keep your eyes peeled. Ew. Just peel those.
Just peel those corneas.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming. So where should people look for that? Just go scufflebuddies.com.
Sure, I don't know.
If you've signed up for the newsletter.
Maybe.
The newsletter rolls out slowly, though. So
if you sign up for the newsletter, just wait. A long time.
Yep.
And eventually it'll find you.
And then remember to check your spam folder.
Yes.
Repeatedly, because who knows?
You could also just go to the Butterscotch Discord at bit.ly/BSDiscord. Probably someone in there will just know where it is.
Mm-hmm. Probably go to the Scuffle Buddies subreddit if you aren't afraid of that scary, spooky place.
Mm-hmm. I'm afraid of Reddit.
I am also afraid of Reddit.
Hey.
I have to go there sometimes.
Yeah, so those are 2 big things. Crashland's coming out in China. It's launch week. Everything's on fire. And we got a Scuffle Buddies announcement also coming out.
We decided to do both of those. Not only the same week, but the same day.
Well, I think the problem was we realized that,
things have just been too easy.
Life
is too short.
You're going to die.
Yeah.
Just get it done.
You're going to die. So you might as well just speed that shit up. Just like really stress yourself.
Yeah.
Just get it over with.
Set yourself alight,
Yeah. All right. So there's 2 other things I want to talk about before we move on to questions. These aren't news items so much as just interesting brain exercises, which are like exercises, but for your brain tubes.
Yep.
So the first thing is there's a book called Antifragile, which is by Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
Speaking of catching things on fire, just to see if you can recover from them. Because that's basically what this book is.
That's basically what this book is. Yeah. I was like, wait, where are you going with that? So the book is called Antifragile, and the author makes a very compelling point, which is that we actually have a missing word in the English language.
In all languages.
In all languages.
That he knows. He knows many languages, which he makes sure to tell you on numerous occasions throughout the book.
Reading this book is like you get to like ride the ego wave, like you're learning
stuff. It's a tsunami.
You're learning stuff. And you're also like, you also get to just kind of bask in the glow of his sort of ego. So the idea is that people tend to think of things as either being fragile or robust. So something that's fragile, when it's exposed to certain stressors, it breaks, and otherwise nothing happens. Things that are robust tend to not break when exposed to most stressors, and of course they still will have they'll still be fragile.
They'll become fragile
at
a point. Yeah,
right. So things are either fragile or robust in relation to certain things.
Randomness, basically.
Volatility, randomness. Mm-hmm. So you knock over a glass vase, it's fragile. You knock over like a steel cup, it's not. It's robust, right? Mm-hmm. But then there's this third type of thing, which is anti-fragile. So if you think about it as a spectrum, where say like fragile is -1 on the far left, right? Robust is 0. There's something else over here at the one side of the spectrum, which is antifragile, which is the literal opposite of fragile. So this is a system or a thing that when it's exposed to certain stressors, it actually gets better. It gets stronger, right? And this is all living things are antifragile, which is crazy. So last week, Adam talked about how his teeth were falling out because he hadn't chewed in 2 weeks.
Yep.
That's because your teeth are anti-fragile. You have to keep applying pressure to them. Otherwise, they just kind of get loose and fall out of your face.
They're like, I don't need to be here anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm out.
And so your muscles are anti-fragile. Right? You go to the gym and you lift weights, which actually causes microscopic damage to your muscles, your muscle fibers. And then when your body repairs them, it repairs them stronger than they were before. Right. And so all of these are examples of basically exposing yourself to harm, basically, but in certain measured amounts.
So of course, enough harm, you're still fragile too.
Yep. Right. So if
you lift too much weights and just rip your bicep off,
that's you're worse off.
it's probably gonna be a permanent problem for you.
Yeah. And so this is actually an interesting concept because I think once you have a word for it, then you can start to recognize when you're failing to take advantage of it. So for example, if anytime you get a little bit cold, you put a coat on, you're not taking advantage of the fact that your body gets used to whatever temperature you expose it to. And the more you just always bundle up, then the colder you're going to feel just all the time. Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, within a window, but yeah.
Within a window. if it's 0, put a fucking coat on.
Yeah, otherwise you will die.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Because you are anti-fragile, relative to cold weather, but you are fragile relative to freezing weather. Right.
Yep.
So, I don't know. It's just a very interesting idea.
Well, it's also interesting because as kids, we just don't give a fuck about anything, right? We're not worried about being a little bit uncomfortable. So I remember being outside like all summer, every summer, like cutting down thistles and thorny vines and things with a machete without a shirt on,
gloves, no shirt,
without a glove. Yeah,
maybe some sandals.
And you know what that
lucky.
did? You know what that did? It toughened you up.
Yeah. And now
character.
But now I'm very weak because I would not go out and do that again.
Yeah, because you haven't done it in a long time, which means your systems have degraded, so you can't handle that kind of shit anymore.
Yep.
Right. So weirdly, and so an anti-fragile system gets stronger in response to stressors, but it also gets weaker without them.
And our brains are also anti-fragile systems.
You have to constantly be using it, otherwise it deteriorates.
Well, actually,
and throwing it at new things.
Yeah. So I found this over the last 2 months or so. There's about a 4-week window where just due to a bunch of other stuff we were doing in the studio, I wasn't reading anything outside of work. And that was probably the first like large chunk of time this entire year where I just there wasn't a thing that I was sort of just generally mulling over or feeding on.
Just packing knowledge in.
Yeah. And I slowly toward the end of it, I just started getting like weird. I just kind of started feeling kind of dumb. I mentioned this to you guys. It's like, I just feel a little weird. I don't know what's going on. I can't seem to get my head straight. Having trouble sort of writing, just you're not really feeling too good about stuff. And then as I was putting it together, I was like, okay, what's been going on? Like, let's do this reflection thing. Like what is the difference? Because everything was going great. So there was no obvious things. I was like, has anything left the scene? And then I realized I had read a book in a month. So I go pick up a book and within like 2 or 3 days was feeling right as rain again, right? As far as being able to think. And I found it one of the best ways for me to actually sort of kickstart my days. If I spend 20 minutes reading, not an article on the web, but actually just reading a book or something like that, for whatever reason, it just sort of like really primes my brain for thinking about stuff over the course of the day.
Yeah.
And so it's the thing I've now that I recognize that, I was like, oh, okay, I can just be always have a thing that I am reading or sort of, feeding knowledge into on the back end during work.
Hell yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is, I think it's nice to have a word for this because once you have a name for something, then you can actually see it and you can identify it and stuff. So I don't know. I think I would like to hear from our listeners if they've had any experiences like this, where they've like toughened themselves up. Or had periods where they didn't do something for a long time and then discovered, oh my God, this thing is impossible now when it used to be so fucking easy, Because you'll find that it's basically a constant force throughout your life. So that's the one book, Anti-Fragile. There's another book called The Gray Rhino, which I think is very fascinating. Adam and I both just started reading it. And the concept of a gray rhino, it's the name for any event that is essentially catastrophic, like a large impact event.
Say like the financial crisis of 2008.
Right. And it's specifically, it's an event that you can see coming for a very long time. It's called a gray rhino.
So more like global warming.
Well, a lot of people did.
They did, but literally every rational human being knows that global warming is a real problem.
Right.
And it's going to fuck us up real bad.
Yeah. So the issue with it's called a gray rhino because of how obvious it is, in the sense that if you're standing, say, like on a plane, and you can see out into the horizon, and there's a gray rhino out there, and it starts running at you, and it's going to charge at you, you've got time to react because it's real far away, and it's obvious.
Real big.
It's real big. You're not going to miss it.
Not super agile.
Right. And the one thing
you could get out of the way.
Right. And the one thing that will ensure that you get trampled is if you just stand there, which is generally the way that it turns out people respond to gray rhino type events. So in the case of the 2008 financial crisis, it was really, there were a pretty good number of people who were in a position to do something and had all the signs and had been receiving warnings for about a decade, right, about the deteriorating state of the U.S. financial system. And actually, I think it was like the World Economic Report in early 2008. Their number one concern that they issued was mispricing of financial assets in the United States, right? And everybody's like, meh. And then everything collapses.
No, some people saw that gray rhino coming and then just bet against the United States.
Right. Well, they couldn't.
And made
they couldn't stop it, so they just wrote it.
Well, no, but also where's the incentive to stop it if you can
make a bunch of cash,
make a bunch of money, right? Because the people who didn't want to make a bunch of money just wanted to actually stop it. Now I had to convince all these people who would make a bunch of money if it happened to stop. To just maybe not.
Right. So another thing that you'll see in gray rhinos is that oftentimes people who are in a position to do something about it, there are other systems in play that
they are disincentivized.
That incentivize them not to do something about it.
So what do you think? Are there any gray rhinos that you see in the games industry in particular that are things that are coming down the pipe?
Well, here's the problem. Probably. but what makes it a gray rhino is that you don't realize that it's a problem, even though it should obviously be.
I think loot boxes is actually the thing. I don't know if you've seen all the stuff that's been happening last month, but
you mean like in-game buying
loot boxes? They're starting to get the heat turned up on them in terms of both legality and classification as gambling. They're under review by some committee in the UK. And my guess is as soon as something like that comes down somewhere, it's going to spread considerably.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's the sort of thing
if you're a game company basing your model off of loot boxes, you better have an alternative system in place.
You better have a switch ready to flip.
But more likely, but what would happen then, just to continue the metaphor, right, is that if this does go down and then it turns out this is now gambling and becomes regulated, then just a whole bunch of companies will go bankrupt instead.
Right.
Because
they
should be looking and being like, maybe we should plan for this, and then have a switch, have some alternative plan in place, have an idea of how they're going to restructure their company in some way to compensate, and just have a plan ready to go. Because this is something that isn't super unlikely and also not very far off, so you should be able to plan for it. But most are not going to.
Right. Yeah. And the reason that people tend to avoid gray rhinos, I think there's a couple things. One is the bystander effect, which is if you can diffuse responsibility among a lot of other people. So global warming is a perfect example. This affects the whole world.
Yep.
Right. So it's not my problem. It's everyone's problem. So let somebody else take care of it. Right. So instead, nobody takes care of it, and then everybody dies. So that's one reason. Another is that acknowledging a problem puts you in a position of having to decide what to do about it, right? Which is why it's like Al Gore called his movie An Inconvenient Truth, right? Because it really is inconvenient to have to actually look at real problems and then do things about them. Like it's much better to just go on with your day. And
the fact is that you don't get to solve these problems for free either. They always come at some enormous cost, right? So when it comes to like global warming, the only way to fix it is to completely change how we do energy production and consumption. So the cost is fucking enormous, right? So you don't get to just do that. It was a similar deal with another example in the book of a financial crisis in like 2001 in Argentina, I think it was. Yeah. Where everybody knew that what they would have to do to prevent this from happening, all the private institutions, all the banks and things that had loaned the Argentinian government money would have to forgive 30% of that debt. And if everybody did it,
it'd be fine.
Then it would be fine.
They would be able to cover it.
Yep.
They'd
lose. Yeah. All these banks would lose 30% of that debt ownership, but
They'd still have the rest.
The company would recover. Everything would be fine. But instead they just didn't. And as a result, the economy collapsed, and then they lost 70% instead of 30%, because that was what the value ended up being. Right. Even though everybody involved knew that was the move that they had to make, but because the cost was so high to actually make the move, so instead people just stood there.
This is the whole "I'd rather die" joke. Yeah, because it's like, oh, you need to go, maybe you need to go get your tooth pulled because otherwise it's going to do blah 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 blah, and you're like, well, I'd just rather be dead.
Yep.
Because I don't want to go through it. Yep.
Yeah. It's also like,
it's convenient.
I could. You got to stop eating ice cream every night, because then otherwise you'll get obesity and diabetes, etc. You're like, well, but I'd rather be dead if I couldn't have those things, which also still could be true, because for me that is true.
Right. Sure. To each his own.
Yeah. Each person.
But I think, but again, having a name for something helps you to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And so I think one of the things that I think would be sort of prudent for us to be doing is whenever we do sort of like reviews in our studio is to just ask the question, are there any gray rhinos that we need to be thinking about? Mm-hmm. And also just like now, if you see an article about something, you can just link it out and just be like, is this a gray rhino?
Yeah. Right.
Like, is this a thing that we need to be not getting trampled by?
Which then goes back to the anti-fragility concept too, right? Is you don't necessarily have to change all of the things that you do. And a lot of the premise of that book about how you deal with this is the same way that people diversify a risk in like a management portfolio of any kind, where if you only bet on the thing in the middle of the bell curve, then you're going to do fine on average. On average, you'll do average. Yeah, until something bad happens, and then you either do great or you fail. Like those are your kind of things. But if you are actually embracing this idea of anti-fragility, then you still put most of your stuff in the bell curve, but then you take a sizable fraction of your, skill or assets or whatever, and then you basically make a whole bunch of small bets on random stuff, on things with unknown outcomes that are basically uncapped.
Or more importantly, things that run counter to the market.
Exactly.
Like gold.
You bet against yourself.
So when the economy collapses, gold goes up.
Yep.
Right.
So if you just own a little bit of gold all the time, then, you just kind of have that there. You got to back up that actually. And the idea is that as one goes down, the other goes up, so that you end up fine.
Right. Here's a question. But that's how you just end up with a robust portfolio.
Right. Is by embracing anti-fragility.
How would you consider within this sort of idea paradigm the toxic player behavior online? Does that count because if that's a gray rhino, it's certainly already hit everybody in the face.
Oh yeah, I think absolutely.
So here's a question. So we've been talking about the possibility of doing multiplayer in the future, right? Is that us putting ourselves in the path of a gray rhino?
Right.
Knowing how bad online communities are becoming, and also knowing.
You mean always have been? I don't think they're getting worse. I think people are.
It's more obvious now.
Well, I think people are actually finally trying to undo the damage that has already been done.
I think they are getting worse.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that is because there's coming into online gaming is a generation of people who have always had internet anonymity, and that they've never not known that, right?
True.
And so when we were growing up, when online gaming first appeared in, say, like, the late 90s as a more commonplace thing, so many of the people who were gaming, all their social interactions they had in their entire life had been in person,
fully anonymous,
fully anonymous, right? Yeah. Which means you have to develop a certain type of decorum,
Yeah, I don't actually remember having a super toxic experience, back in the day.
You don't remember those PKs in Diablo 2?
I do.
I do. Yeah.
I didn't think about them. Like, they weren't also being verbally.
Yeah, they didn't also threaten to kill me in real life.
Yeah, they were exploiting the game, but
they were being dicks. I mean, they were still there.
They were still there.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Is like, it's a question of whether there is sort of like a fringe group of people who are kind of dicks, or whether the community just reinforces that behavior.
Right. Because maybe the world we live in now is just a world full of dicks.
It might be. Maybe
we just live in a dick world.
It's like the Upside Down. Speaking of Stranger Things 2 is out. Apparently very good.
It's very good.
I've heard good things.
A little plug for that one.
We got to finish the first season. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good question, because if you read any articles about Overwatch specifically, this has been just like the thorn in Blizzard's paw, the entire time they've been working on this game.
Well, I think there's an interesting component here too, though, which is that, so we talked about this with, it's interesting that it doesn't quite exist in the same way in something like World of Warcraft, or at least didn't back in the day.
It does now.
It does now, but it didn't back in the day. And so I played on one of the older servers of Burning Crusade, I think is the one. Yeah. Which is before it was super easy to just like pop in and out of gameplay. And I think this is actually part of the thing with Overwatch, with League, whatever else, is that there's actually not any downtime like between you just going in to whoop some ass, There's no just hanging out moments. And so as a result, it's so action oriented that you're not developing any social bonds that aren't happening.
It's not actually a sense of community. It's just people you play this game.
Modern games tend to reinforce play versus social aspects, right? So they streamline that experience to cut out any conceivable downtime where you might have to just chat with somebody, for a little while.
Because you're walking across the world. It just takes 5 minutes.
It takes 5 whole minutes to walk across the planet.
So what are you going to do to entertain yourself? You're just going to chat with people,
Yeah. And I mean, this reminds me of WildStar did not have what I would consider to be a toxic community, but it had a very disengaged, I would say it didn't even have a community. It was an MMO that was kind of modeled after a lot of the sort of difficulty of old World of Warcraft Burning Crusade. But their design philosophy was to make everything really, really exciting. So the combat was intense. If you didn't pay attention for 3 seconds, you would have missed something that you had to dodge and you just get one shot. You had to constantly be interrupting things on a specific sequence or timer. If you miss it, you get one shot. And then even mundane things in the environment, like you'd see a butterfly and you'd touch it, and then an announcer voice comes in and it screams, it's like, challenge begins. And there's like a meter on your screen. It's like, collect as many butterflies as you can. And then it's like, you got 5 minutes, and then you get like a gold, silver, or bronze medal for it, and it's just like, you can't take a single step in that game without an over-the-top announcer screaming at you to do something, right?
Right. Well, I think it's interesting.
So the game collapsed.
Yeah, like it sucked all the oxygen out of the room from a socialization.
Because you had no time to just talk to people.
Right.
And of course, the social dynamic of, particularly an MMO, is the thing that keeps it going.
Right. Because I keep thinking about even if something like Stardew Valley, even if they didn't, I know they're doing multiplayer next year, but even if they didn't do multiplayer, but all it was there was just like a shared chat. Because a lot of the game, like you're just walking all over the damn place, and then you're just like mining stuff. Like you click once.
And you just had someone to talk to.
Yeah, but you don't have to click too much though, because if you could like automate your tasks a little bit, because then
that's true. They don't take long enough to do that you can.
This is why the best feature, the best and most underappreciated feature in World of Warcraft is auto run.
Yes,
you press a single button, your character just runs forward.
Also, the fact that it actually takes you time to do stuff like mine. So you just slam on this for it's like 5 seconds or something. Usually in that time, if someone else is on, I type them a note. Yeah. I'm a human. I need to be constantly.
Or you're crafting and you're like, I got to make like 50 fucking rough blasting powders, and each one takes 5 seconds to craft. So
we'll be here a while.
Your character's sitting there just like turning away, like progress bar after progress bar. You're like, yeah, I'll just have a chat with somebody.
The thing is, I wonder if they even knew. I thought originally that they understood what that was doing, but of course, as the games progressed and as the designs progressed,
they've taken it all
away.
I
wonder if they didn't actually realize how that whole thing was really, really working well together. Which is that
they made their own gray rhino.
They did,
But it is an important consideration though if you're making a multiplayer thing. Because we had this discussion last week where we were talking about the features of Butterscotch ID. We want to rebuild in the new, reinstantiated version of the thing, and we had gotten into social features, and we had to ask this question of, what are all the downsides of all of this? And it turns out the number of downsides is fucking enormous to any kind of social feature you add, because everything you add, you are now, as the person who made that thing, ethically on the hook for any kinds of behaviors that happen inside of it.
Yeah. And I mean, when we make a game, we get to decide what goes into it.
Yep.
Once we open up a channel of communication with you and a rando on the internet, all bets are off. That could be the worst. That could be the worst human-to-human interaction you've ever had.
Back to that idea of Stardew Valley. If you're in there just enjoying your farming, and then someone just comes
and just like fuck you,
which is what always happens. It's just weird.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, we were starting to talk through all these different design mechanisms of how do we. All right, when somebody's an asshole, how do we resolve that, or do we need to intercept messages and have them screened via some service that looks for negativity? What do we need to do? And as we're talking about this, I was like, I don't want to do any of this.
Can we not?
Can we just not? And then if we're like, it'd be really good to have this social feature, now we can figure out, okay, fine, let's solve all 1,000 of these problems and figure out how to actually deal with it. Because of course, also as soon as you try to like block somebody, now they believe they're in a cat and mouse game with you. Mm-hmm. As anybody who's been on Reddit before has probably experienced, if you ever dealt with an asshole on there, right? Our moderators in our Crashland subreddit were just dealing with this asshole for like 2 weeks that was just hounding them repeatedly because he went on some like profanity riddled rant in one of our things, and we just have a no profanity policy only in Reddit, you know, obviously not in life. And he was just so angry that his post got taken down that he decided he just had to make the moderators. So
he just miserable. Spammed every one of the moderators.
He just spammed them. He made new accounts. He was just doing, and there was no way to escape it because
it's so weird
because you can't, you know. And so just what if we just didn't have to do that?
And the problem is, as you're walking down the street and you look around and you just see random people, any one of them could have been that person.
I know.
Who was it?
It makes you cynical.
Yeah. So it's hard. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get on to some questions. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. So if you'd like to get your question on a future episode, go on there and ask us a question.
Also, don't put any emojis in the text box.
Don't do emojis because apparently that breaks the website.
It's a legacy system. It's no good.
So now we're probably going to get lots of emojis in there now.
Treat it with respect or we have to take it away from you. You know,
it's probably going to be destroyed.
That's probably true.
Yeah. So we'll need to update that system probably. So.
Yeah. It's I don't know about that.
Yep.
Get your question in before it's destroyed.
Get your question in early.
All right. First question comes from La Destitute, who says, my first commercial game dev project, which is a 2D Zelda-like game kit / SDK, is close to release. Do you guys have any advice regarding...
Very hard for me to guess what that would be.
Do you guys have any advice regarding handling things like marketing for on release / during the ensuing couple of weeks before that? So the first thing is you're going to need a punchier sort of a pitch.
There are billions of Zelda likes.
Yep.
So
also lots of SDKs.
Yeah. Also, how is a game an SDK?
I do not understand.
Yeah.
So unless that stands for some other game genre I'm unfamiliar with.
It's like an RTS, you know, it's
Super
just
Donkey Kong.
It's a Super Donkey Kong Zelda like.
The big things are it's okay to use other games as a reference point if you're, especially when you're sort of starting out and getting your first stuff out there. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But if you don't know what it is about your game that is like of just an interesting thing, you can just pick a thing, literally anything. You'd be like, handmade pixel graphics. People are like, oh, neat.
It's kind of like when you go into a restaurant and they describe the food to you and they're like fluffy buttermilk pancakes. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But really they're just regular pancakes because every fucking pancake is fluffy.
Well, so this persuasive advertising book that I'm currently about halfway through.
Is that what it's called? It's just called
Persuasive Advertising.
Persuasive Advertising.
This is basically a textbook.
It works to sell itself.
And it's phenomenal. So, but one of the points
I find this title persuasive.
One of the points they have in there is this idea called a USP, unique selling point. And the point they make is that you can either have one that actually is unique or that is fakely unique because no one else is pointing it out.
Yeah.
So for example, you could say, oh, this was made by a one-man dev team, which is a unique selling proposition. It may not be unique only to you, but it's interesting enough that maybe other people aren't claiming it a lot, and so it seems like a special.
Maybe they should call it the unique enough selling point.
Yes. Well, but the whole point is that if you have one that is actually a real unique point, then that's of course where you get the most power.
You can also
it's okay.
Yeah, you can also invent negatives, which by announcing them imply that the other things do that thing, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're like, this game doesn't give you diabetes, right? Everybody's like, what? I'm in. What about the other games, though?
My favorite example from this book was this marketer who went and visited a brewery who they're sort of working up a new ad campaign, and they're trying to find some selling point. And he saw them steaming the bottles, which is how they clean them before the beer goes in. And he's like, "That's really neat. You guys ever talk about that? No one ever talks about that." And they were like, "Well, everybody does that. You know, it's literally not special at all." And so their market, he's like, doesn't matter because no one else has claimed that as their thing. And so their whole thing was that their bottles were cleaned with live steam.
Right. So yeah, you do that. And now somebody else can come in and be like, so are ours.
Yeah.
Because now it seems like they're copying.
Yep.
Right. So, they copied your process. Yep. Right.
So of course it's weaker. It is weaker than actually having a selling point. But if it's a case that, for example, you have this 2D Zelda-like game. Again,
is this sort of like having non-GMO salt?
Yes.
Yeah. Or it's like having a cold Miller Lite.
Yep.
Like all they advertise is how cold it is,
which isn't a property of Miller Lite.
You just put it in the fridge, right? That's it. That's the whole thing. Yep. But they're just like, it's got to be cold.
So the thing to do is to look at your game and to focus on some aspect of it. So we actually did this much better with our earlier games than we did with some of our later games. So Towel Fight, for example, the pitch we used to get it in front of press, which actually worked very effectively. We got in Kotaku with it, was shoot animals out of your face. So we just honed right in. And that actually was similarly described as a Zelda-like sort of later on.
We could have called it a, roguelite story-based dual thumbstick shooter, Right. But all we said was shoot animals out of your face.
Which is better.
Right. And the press were like, oh, sounds like a live stream to me.
Which I think importantly comes down to, we've been trying to refine our marketing brains. Mm-hmm. And we come to realize that, people buy things based on the feeling that you've created, not based on the list of features that you've enumerated. Which if you go back and look at the Crashlands trailer,
kind of a list of features.
It's just a list of features. Yep. I mean, yes.
Fortunately, we also conveyed a feeling.
We also screamed throughout, which helped, I think, to convey some kind of emotion. But
as I guess sort of on Thursday when we do the next Scuffle Buddies thing, you might see one of the things that we think we may have learned. I guess you'll see an example of this conveyance of a feeling sort of approach.
Yeah.
On a budget.
On a budget.
Yeah, so I would say just drill into just even pick one special thing about it. So I remember Death Road to Canada, which is a phenomenal little pixel art game where your group of survivors trying to make it to Canada during the zombie apocalypse. One of their whole points is that you can have a dog in your party who drives the car. Like the dogs can drive cars and also I think wield guns.
Yeah. And honestly, nothing about that game sounded compelling, even the slightest, except for that part.
Exactly. So
I almost bought it. I was like this close.
You can sell a game on one little piece if it's just really interesting. And it doesn't have to be the mechanic. It doesn't have to be the narrative. It can be some just small, almost what you'd think of.
You're trying to make somebody imagine themselves playing your game, right? And in this case, like you take that one thing, like there's something awesome about having your pet doggo driving your car and shooting zombies.
Yep.
Well, I think that's
awesome
like
about
that's like a it's a fantasy that everybody has who has a dog. Like, it'd be so badass if this dog could do other things.
There's a new one that just came out from the Kit Fox studio.
They have a new one?
Yeah. So this has been blowing up all over the place because of the extremely clever marketing angle of the whole thing, which is it's a dungeon crawler, but where you get to date your weapons.
You get to
so it's called,
I gotta check this out.
It's called Boyfriend Dungeon. And so essentially what it is it's like you do monster battle, like you do normal sort of RPG dungeon crawler stuff. And then when you come back up, like you rescue weapons down there. When you come back up to the surface, they transform into people and you try to woo them and date them.
That's awesome.
And I don't know.
So it's like a dating sim dungeon crawler.
Yes.
Interesting.
Everyone's like, this is amazing, right? And the name of the thing just does it. Boyfriend Dungeon. You're like, what?
All these boyfriends are trapped in this dungeon and they got turned into weapons.
There was also that dad dating simulator.
Yes.
Yep.
It was a similar kind of a gist where just like
all the whole concept. Hot dads.
Yeah. The whole concept was just sufficient. Everyone was like, gotta check this out. Gotta understand.
Yeah. So I think it's just understanding what in some game cases you have a mechanic like Boyfriend Dungeon that is essentially so compelling just by itself, or Goat Simulator, right?
Yeah, but again, you can also just add the one thing. So if you've got a game and there's a dog in it, then you can be like, what if this dog could drive my car?
Right.
Then that's like, and our friends from Rack 7, I'm not going to talk about their game, but they have done something, and one of the things that they're working on that sort of captures all of this perfectly, where it's just like everything you look at, you're like, this didn't need to happen. There's no reason for this to be happening.
But it is very amusing.
But it is very
But I think importantly
and sufficient
in this secret game that Rack 7 is working on that we're not going to talk about. They did a really great job of anticipating the moments where the player would go, I wonder if I can do this.
Yeah,
and then sure enough, you can do that, even though you totally shouldn't be able to, and there's no reason to do it. Right. So
yeah. So that's the thing is, if you're looking at your game and you're asking, if you feel like, I just have to compare this to other things that already exist, and I don't really know kind of what sets it apart, just ask, is there a thing I can do? Is there one thing, some small thing I can add or change or whatever that's going to take this, that's going to become that unique selling point because it's compelling enough that someone's going to be like, I have to know what this means.
I think it's like we had plenty of notes from people who said like, I literally bought this game because of the trailer. Yep. The unique selling point in the trailer was this is just patently absurd. Like the whole thing was just ridiculous.
Yeah, which is the lesson we took from Battle Block Theater. Just watching their trailer, where again, like I watched that because it looked like it was like a 2D puzzle platformer. And
normally I would not be interested.
I would never buy that, but I watched the few trailers for it, and I was just so hooked on the vibe that they were selling that I was like, I wonder if this carries through in the game experience. Because if that was going to be my experience, if it was anything like the trailer, it was going to be worth having.
Well, actually, I think we did miss the mark there because Crashlands is pretty chill.
Yeah, doesn't quite.
Oh, yeah.
And our trailer is sort of a scream fest.
Yeah, the trailer's got no chill in it.
Nope.
So
there's that.
There's still worked okay.
But I think also importantly,
nobody seemed to feel misled.
Also, importantly, the Battle Block Theater trailer is just jokes. So they'll be like realistic hair physics, and then they just like show a
2D sprite.
like a 2D sprite. But our trailer, we
put the real features.
We actually have real features.
We made jokes about them, but it is still the real features.
Yeah. So we thought that was a step up, but nobody cares about features.
Nope.
Nobody gives a shit about features.
Yep. Yeah. So pick a thing that your game is doing, or maybe there's a boss fight that is particularly interesting, and you're like, in this game, you get to punch a sentient pinata to death. Very interesting.
Yeah. And if you want great marketing examples, just go back and watch No Man's Sky videos because they had one
18
angle.
quintillion. That was their USP. Like
their one angle was
it's
really fucking big.
Yep.
This game is so big. And so the people would be like, is there multiplayer? They'd be like, let's just say if there was, it wouldn't even matter because it's so fucking big, right? There's 18 quintillion planets.
How could you ever find anybody?
How could you ever find anybody?
They should have just said no.
They should have said no. So don't.
Well, no, but not necessarily. Because the whole idea of this is that no, you should always reframe it back to your unique side.
Well, they should. They
did a great job of. They just didn't control the other side of.
Right. They forgot to also say no after they reframed.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So they could have said we can't do multiplayer because the universe
it would
is
be
so
pointless
big.
Because it's so big.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so they forgot that first part.
Yeah. So no, we got to spend all of our development time making it even bigger.
And we don't have time. And if you watch like in almost all of their pre-launch gameplay videos, the player doesn't do anything at all except walk around and look at stuff.
Yeah, but it looks good.
And they'll
it's real big.
And if they do like developer commentary, they'll be like, all they do is talk about how you're discovering all these things for the first time because the universe is so big that nobody else has been to this planet before.
Nobody else has seen this unique combination of creature parts.
Yep. They'll look up into the sky and be like, you see that planet there? We could go there. And it's just as much stuff on that planet as on this planet. Maybe even more. Who knows? We don't know what's there. It's crazy. Right. So that was just their whole pitch. And every single time they were asked about features, they always just moved it back into talking about how big the game is. Mm-hmm. So that's really.
So the other part of that lesson is, be careful.
Be careful. Be careful what expectations you set up.
Yep.
But recognize that people get excited about things based on feelings, not on specific features.
It was actually something really nice that we're able to do with this, the way we're handling the marketing with Scuffle Buddies. That's so different from Crashlands because we basically gave everything away immediately with Crashlands. And also
we were posting dev blogs after like 3 months.
Right. And so, but the thing is that the overall feeling of the game actually did not change, but we didn't recognize that that was what the concrete thing was at that time that we should have been talking about, as opposed to all the systems and things that were going to be thrown in the trash or gutted later and that sort of thing. And the nice thing about the approach we're taking now is it's actually very modular. So we're just sort of throwing out a piece at a time, and we're able to see what people get excited about and then react and modify things for the next message so that things either get more solidified or they get sort of course corrected.
We're trying to create a sort of self-reinforcing hype train. That accelerates under its own power.
More like an antifragile marketing system, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That gains by people being confused about it in the short term.
That is true, because I mean we've been talking with other sort of marketing veterans in the game. We've been seeking out mentors. Sam specifically has been seeking out mentors to talk about like what should we do? Like how do we get people pumped about this game?
And they were like, all those things you did do,
just don't do those things because like you got to understand that you basically have two things you're trying to do. You're trying to get people really excited and you're trying to get people to talk. Mm-hmm. You're not just trying to tell people stuff, and you like it's not that you're going to say, here is the list of features in my game, and that person's going to go, I have memorized the list of features. I will purchase the game on the
Actually, I don't know if anybody else is. I don't read the Steam descriptions in the store.
No,
I don't either.
I was just thinking about how I bought Divinity Original Sin 2 because 2 weeks ago Sam was like, hey, or I mentioned Sam, I was like, I'm trying to find some kind of RPG to play because I haven't played a single player RPG in forever. And Sam was like, you should check out this Divinity Original Sin. I was like, all right. And then I opened up the trailer. I was like, good enough. And I just
yeah, for me, I don't even read the short description.
No,
I don't read any of it. I look at the visual.
I looked at the trailer and I looked
video.
at the review scores.
Yep. And I flipped through a few videos trying to find gameplay since nobody shows any.
Yes.
To get a sense of like, what would it feel like to play the game?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I looked at the review score overall, and then I looked at some of the negative reviews just to see, because I'm like, what are people mad about? And it's almost invariably people who have like
just dumb stuff.
They've got like 8,000 hours in the game and they're like nitpicking about some bullshit. So I'm like, perfect. This game must be fantastic, right? So I played it, and actually I didn't enjoy it for the first couple hours, but I was like, there must be something here. So I kept going at it, and it's fantastic. It sort of has a
warm up,
a long warm up period,
as many PC games do.
But again, I didn't actually know what was in this game because I watched the trailer, read a review, and then bought it.
Yeah, your level of informedness is quite low.
I am completely uninformed. That's how I want it, because I want to be surprised. I don't want to just know everything that's going to happen in this game, right?
Yeah, that is the other thing, is every time I find a thing with legit gameplay videos, I don't think I've ever seen one where I was actually more excited after watching the gameplay videos, even though to me there's sort of a requirement. Like I need to see it, but I'm always just like, I still don't know, but I still want, I want that information that I don't even use.
I would view the gameplay video not as a selling mechanism, but as a reassuring mechanism.
Right.
So reducing the risk. You see the gameplay and you're like, all right, it seems like it's fine. Like there's nothing weird, like janky animations or anything like that.
It looks good.
Looks good enough.
Actually, that's true. There was one game, I'm not going to name it, but there was a game I bought recently. And it was like a cute little multiplayer game. Bought a copy for my wife too. It was like, ooh, because we haven't had a good spouse game to play over a weekend for a long time. Like Terraria was really the last one, and we're just tired of it.
Diane and I are looking for one right now. For Thanksgiving coming up.
There's fucking nothing. So I was like, ooh, maybe this is going to be one. So I bought it. It actually had decent reviews, but not that many. But I had decent reviews. I bought it, gave it to Jenny, and then I sat down to give it a test run just to see what the game was about. And the first thing I noticed upon booting up the game was that the characters didn't blink. Now, this is a fucking cardinal sin. If you're making a game and you're listening to this and your characters don't blink,
get your shit together.
Make your characters blink. But there was no life in the game at all. So I was annoyed immediately because I know from us, doing this and from talking to students who are making games, where this is always the thing that we tell everybody, because nobody actually puts life into their characters.
Everything must blink.
Everything must blink at minimum.
Even robots. You may notice that Juicebox blinks in Crash Nights. Yeah, he's a robot. The packages they blink. Because they have eyes.
Yeah, so just gotta blink. And things have to kind of breathe, right? There has to just be movement, so it feels like it was alive. So this game just felt so fucking static that I was immediately just turned off, But there wasn't a gameplay trailer for this thing, because the screenshots actually looked pretty good. It was cute, kind of retro kind of art, looked kind of nice, but
in stills.
You can't see blinking.
It didn't, right? But it looked like it was in that gray area between amateur and professional, where I was like, oh, this is probably a pretty good indie game. But then when I actually booted it and saw it, running and it was live, and I was like, oh no, what have I done?
You're just staring into this character's cold, dead eyes the whole time.
So I think you're right. I think a gameplay video is a reassurance mechanism.
So one good example of the opposite of that was a game called Secrets of Grandia.
Oh yeah.
Which they have multiplayer. So I think Diane and I might be trying that one out. But they do, everything is animated to such a high degree that it just feels amazing to run around in their place. Because there's people just walking around. There's people at one point you walk into near one of the houses, and someone's actively carving a statue. And then later on, when you come back, it's done.
Nice.
And you're like, damn, that's good.
Yeah, the world feels alive.
Someone who's standing by a window cleaning it. But this is like a 13 frame animation.
If you walk up to that person, do you just hear
Probably. Their attention to detail is ridiculous.
Yeah, but it's weird because it's a pixel art game.
Yeah.
And still they went to that extreme to make the world feel alive.
And you wouldn't have to go that far, because if all you do is just had your characters just kind of breathe a little bit, bounce up and down a bit, just be in different places sometimes to seem like they were doing stuff, You don't have to take it to that extreme, and you can still get a lot out.
No, our approach to that would be basically to take a character, put him next to the window, call it window washer Steve, and then just when you talk to him, you'd be like, I'm on break. right.
right. Because now he's still got personality. Right. It feels like he was doing something. It tells the story.
You'll do the work for us of animating him.
Yeah, you'd be like, I'm sure if I came at a different time, Steve would be totally into washing that window. But right now he's on break, so I'm not going to bother him. Yeah. That's our lazy dev style.
We've talked about the generic animation, like something that you've seen in, actually a lot of games do this now, but World of Warcraft, a good example again, where anytime a character was doing a thing, they just had a particular like hand motion that they did, where like the trolls just sort of like pounded their hand on their fist.
Yeah, they do like a paper rock scissors move.
So they're just sitting there doing that, and you're like, I'm making a potion, and they just start doing that. Or you're like,
I'm summoning my mount. They just like pound their fist.
It's a weird magical system, but
it was very disorienting actually when later on, I think it was in like around Mists of Pandaria. So the game had been out for like 7 or 8 years or something like that. And they added a feature where when you open your map, your character actually pulls a little map out of their pocket and then like opens the map and starts like looking at it. Right. Which it's always weird to see somebody on their mount and they're like riding across the world and they're just like looking at a map while they're driving around.
Texting and driving.
But it's weird because that animation actually serves to highlight how weird the other one is, right? When the only animation was just like weirdly slapping your hands together, then it was like, yeah, you can just fill in the blanks. But as soon as you have more detail for something else,
now you got to have it everywhere.
Now it makes the hand slaps.
So we refer to this as a ratcheting system.
Ratcheting fidelity.
Yeah. So in the case of our graphics, if it's the case that we take one thing up slightly higher than everything else to the point where you can actually tell,
then you've raised the standard.
Now we have to either go back or not do that. So this actually started happening toward the end of Crashlands, where my ability to do art and the art generally had progressed enough that I could actually do better art, like right at the end, but I had to tone it down because it started not fitting, which is a weird place to be in. Good place, but a weird place.
It is weird. Yeah. Fortunately, we don't have that problem this time around.
Scuffle Buddies does look real good right now. You guys don't get to see it, but it looks real good.
And Adam is an honest bystander because he's not working on Scuffle Buddies directly.
Yep. Every so often he just walks by and he goes, "That looks good." So I think we're doing it okay.
Yeah. All right. So I think we have time for one brief question before we end the show. This question comes from Giant Muskrat, who says, you mentioned on another episode that you don't like the Schrodinger's coffee cup that is created when you have a black coffee cup because you can't see the coffee inside. And you end up not drinking because you don't realize whether
this is just a problem for Sam and Seth, by the way.
Right. He said your solution was to have clear glass mugs instead. How can I demystify what is in my black mug that I got from the Butterscotch merch store? Right. So we are selling mugs at our merch shop, and they're black.
So I guess
clear.
I feel somewhat comforted that this is not a rage point just for myself, but rather is just a problem for everybody else.
But how do you feel about having enhanced this problem for other people?
Yeah, we're spreading misery throughout the world
with our mugs. Well, so we now
how many undrunk halves of coffee cups have we created?
To be fair though, my mug today is clear and it got cold just because apparently that's just what I do.
I think
it's a personal problem more so than anything else. But we've gotten requests for lighter mugs, or the internal request is for lighter mugs because they cost so damn much to ship.
Which would probably be nice for everybody who's buying them.
Exactly. So maybe actually that we could get just like a really horrible plastic mug. We get like one of those paper cups and just write on it.
Yeah, we can just get solo cups, red solo cups.
Well, you can't see in those.
And then we'll sell it and we'll just call it mug, but in quotes. Or here's what you do. You buy yourself a shipping scale. Okay. You know how much?
Who does? We do?
No, you just leave it on the shipping scale.
On your desk, you keep a scale, right? You just weigh out the mug. You zero out the scale.
I'm with you. I hear you.
With an empty mug.
Yeah. So then once it hits zero, then you know you're actually done.
Right. Then you now have a HUD basically.
But you're gonna need one that doesn't drift though, because a lot of scales will kind of drift over time.
Yeah, you got to get a high quality, probably like at least $100 scale.
Yep. Yeah. It should probably also be a USB scale with a heating element inside of it, so it can also keep your coffee warm.
And you're gonna wanna probably hook it up to an Arduino or something. Yeah. So that it sounds off some kind of shrieking alarm, when it reaches past a certain threshold.
To save you from this pain point with one of our products, we're coming out with this.
We got a new line of products.
And then it can talk to a web API, maybe through Butterscotch ID, for example, that you can hook your coffee maker up to, so that once your coffee in your cup hits a certain level, then it turns on your coffee maker because it's time for more, you know? So
Yeah.
by the time you have those last like 3 sips done, boom, more
Then you
coffee.
run into one of these scenarios, kind of like when you go to a restaurant and the waiter keeps refilling your water glass just nonstop, and you have to drink it.
Yep. It's the only,
I mean, you
it's the
can't
only
just
move.
not drink water that's in front of you. That's fucking crazy, right? So you just keep drinking it, and then you have to go to the bathroom 35 times during dinner, right? So I feel like this is an appropriate solution to the problem.
I agree. I like it. No, it's a very good point. It's also a very funny misstep of ours, or perhaps, you know.
But
we're
again,
just learning.
I feel fine about it. So
Me too, because some people do like mugs that are black. So there you go.
yep.
It does create sort of a sense of spookiness, you know.
What's in there?
What's in there?
Your soul is what's in there. That's
right.
Every time you look inside, that's what you're actually
It's
seeing.
Schrodinger's coffee cup. Anything could be in there.
Well,
I think that's how
whatever's in there
Schrodinger's-
could be alive or dead. I think
There could be a dead cat in there.
Yeah, be real careful. Sipping.
Actually,
on
it's true. Yeah, because until you look inside, the waveform hasn't collapsed yet. So you just
It might be a dead cat.
Might
So
be a
that's
dead
why you got to
cat.
watch that scale. And
That's
if
right.
It ever
If it
gets real
starts-
heavy, all of a sudden, there's a dead cat in your cup. Do not put
Do
it
not
to your
drink it.
lips.
Just empty that shit out.
Yep.
Clean it.
yep,
Get yourself a refill.
yep.
How spooky would that be if you're just sitting there and the scale starts climbing up?
Your
Yeah,
desk
like-
starts creaking.
The sounds of a cat echoing through
I'm
your
pretty
coffee
sure
mug.
this is the story arc of Stranger Things season 2.
Yeah. Sorry about the spoilers.
We should actually get some clear mugs for
the cup side down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some with like some little gradations on them for like number of mils, I guess.
Maybe a dang measurement.
Ooh, a
cup.
dang meter.
This is like,
Dang- it'll be a dang tank.
my dang tank is full. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
coffee cup, right? There we go.
Because I think probably how much coffee you have left is probably an accurate reflection of your dang
Because
tank.
basically what should happen is once your dang tank runs out, then you switch to your can we not mug, right?
Yeah.
Sorry about a lot of dangs. Can we not?
Well, yeah, your coffee cup just tells the story of your life throughout your day.
I like it.
Yeah, we do need a mug that just says dang tank on the side.
That needs the measurements. Yeah.
And it needs to be a clear mug with a measuring.
And it's number of dangs, I assume. Is dang the unit, or is there some
Yeah.
unit of dangs?
There's a unit of dangs.
Yeah. You have discrete dangs.
Can you have millidangs?
And
Sounds good.
yeah, I mean once they're in liquid form.
Scented
I mean,
dangs?
liquid dangs can be, they're continuous.
Is there some way to I mean, how many dangs could one person have on a given day? Could you
About
have a
8
mega
ounces.
dang? I want like a giga dang.
I want a liter of dangs.
A liter of dangs.
Yeah, I mean you basically start with a liter and then sometimes this
so it's volumetric as well as
right.
somehow numerical.
Right.
Discrete. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So the real problem is, and this comes back to, again, anti-fragility, right?
Probably. Yep.
So if you did nothing the whole weekend, then you have become weak,
Yeah.
right?
You have become
Your dang
weakened.
tank has
Right. You've become weakened. That's why they call it the weekend. So you do nothing on Friday night. You do nothing on Saturday. You do nothing on Sunday. Sunday evening rolls around and you're like, fuck, I got to go to the grocery store.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden, this is a monumental task.
Yeah. Because that's like easily like a 10 milladang exercise.
Well, but here's the problem. The fewer dangs you spend, the more expensive the next dang consuming activity
You're going
becomes.
into dang debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Because you don't just build up excess dangs, you hit your dang cap
Yeah.
over the weekend as you become weakened, and then you don't spend any dangs.
And becoming weakened is just reducing the max volume of your dang.
No, your max volume stays the same. It just increases the price of the next thing, right? Which means like by the time you hit the end of the weekend, you've gotten so weakened that
that there's like your dang to
going
dang
to the,
conversion is
going
like
to the grocery
1
store,
to
all of a
5 or
sudden you're
something.
like, oh my God, I only got a liter of dangs.
But
And
I
going to
gotta
the
use like
grocery
half.
store, it now takes 6 gallons,
right.
you know?
What are you going to do?
And part of the problem too is you got to convert the dangs from gallons to liters, which that takes some dangs by itself.
Yeah.
And,
And then you got to give a dang about how like this whole imperial mechanism we have for no.
What is that? Stoichiometry
Yep. You got to do some stoichiometric analysis.
of your dangs.
yeah, which that takes dangs, and then you're out of dangs by the time you even got your keys in your
It
hand.
becomes a circular dang problem.
Yeah. So again, remember you're anti-fragile, which means don't get weakened over the weekend.
That's right.
Otherwise, you'll run into dangs, and then you'll be hungry on Monday.
Yep. Keep that dang tank running hot.
We'll look into this whole see-through dang tank mug concept. Sounds good. once all of our merch runs out and we have some more money to stock up the wares, we'll do so.
All right, so we'll have an update on that next week. We'll see if we can figure something out. So, all right, that's all the time we have. So we'd like to thank our studio wrangler Monique and our producer Fat Bart for putting this episode together, as well as the Butterscotch dev team, Andy, Tifa, and Sher for having our back while we record this podcast. Special thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord and forums running. And if you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, hop into our Discord server at bit.ly/bsdiscord. Come say hey. We're in there lurking. Sometimes we say hey back. It's pretty nice. Also, if you'd like to adorn your body or your desk with Butterscotch merch, head on over to our merch shop, which is at shop.bscotch.net.
Or your phone, or your bicycle, or your bumper.
Oh, I thought you were offering alternatives to the website. You can go to shop.
I'm referring to things you can adorn.
You can go to shop.bscotch.net. You can go to your bike. You can go to your bumper. You can go to your pants. Also, if you'd like to adorn us with your swag, we have a mailbox over at mailbox.bscotch.net. Sometimes we get candy. Sometimes we just get nice notes. We appreciate all of it, and we will eat whatever you send, even if it's not edible.
Yep.
So
be very careful.
So be careful about that and just bear our safety in mind. Thanks. And if you'd like to send us something, that's over at mailbox.bscotch.net. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.